Hello, friends. Wonderful to see everyone here with us today. Marco will join us in just a second. Hi, Marco.
Hey, Roman.
So today, Marco is a dear friend who I've known for a few years now, and we're going to have a conversation about the relationship between healing and awakening. And before we start, Marco, would you like to introduce yourself, a little bit of your background?
Sure.
Okay, great.
All right. So my name is Marco. I'm 31 years old. I was born in Italy. I grew up in Lebanon. And yeah, so in terms of my background, I guess it's mostly focused in, I've been studying and practicing transpersonal psychology and holotropic breathwork since about 10 years ago I started. And since 8 years ago, I also have been a practitioner of the Dzogchen tradition, teachings from Tibet. And yeah, I have traveled extensively. And yeah, today I'm very happy to be with Paititi, which has been a very important part of my adventure in life.
That's
And
great.
yeah, I'm very involved in many different kinds of projects around. I'm also organizing events and festivals, and also involved in transpersonal. I'm part of the board of Eurotas, which is the global transpersonal network, which facilitates and promotes transpersonal psychology perspective for healing and evolution in today's world. And also I'm very connected with plants and indigenous traditions from different parts. So yeah.
That's great. So I was just going to add that you've been involved also with helping organizing the tribal convergence, and also in Europe, there was a seminar.
Yeah, the Transpersonal Renaissance, it's a gathering, and it's tribal gathering in Panama. I've been collaborating with them since 2000. Well, I first went there in 2015, and I was working with them since 2018, and also involved in indigenous support projects, charity initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So the conversation that we've been having with Marco before is about meaningful meetings between the indigenous elders, and also how to really relate to it as something that can be engaged and implemented in our modern world, and rescue some of those ancestral values in a very practical way. And so we've been having fascinating conversations on the subject. We've made an attempt a few years ago to record, but it didn't come out so good. But we have a transcript that we are working on as a booklet, and we'll have it ready probably soon. And so this is an interesting conversation, because the relationship between healing and awakening is something that is becoming more and more relevant in today's world, where simultaneously we are starting to see how even in our modern society that this kind of comfortably numb existence makes us sick. So when we are asleep and are just ants in the conveyor belt, that tends to make us ill as a result of that. And so there's a direct relationship between healing and awakening that is becoming, from what I see, very relevant in the modern world today. How can we stay awake and healthy at the same time? So if you want to add a little bit about that, Marco.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly, for me, it's a very fascinating subject, and has been also very relevant in my own personal journey. And I guess, well, we used two words in this conversation, which is healing and awakening. And yeah, I guess, well, sleepiness, or at least not being aware, or lack of awareness, is, I feel like it's life will keep pulling us back towards awareness, and illness comes into place as kind of a reminder to cultivate awareness, basically. And life will just keep on bringing us through life situations to bring us back to here and now, one way or another.
Right. So it's the awareness that is based on being alive, right? So it's being alive. It's not just kind of like this awareness that is dull in itself, but it's the awareness of aliveness.
Mm.
And it's fascinating for me because in my background, so living and working with the indigenous people and the elders, they would share with me at times how the healing process is in these traditions often related to what they call a soul loss. And then to heal, one has to recover soul, recover spirit, recover buoyancy in a way, back in the world. And I remember talking with you, and you were mentioning to me how initially for you the spiritual path was kind of about losing your personality and losing everything that is human and alive, and then that kind of beats the purpose of it, right? So we can see
Completely.
how this soul recovery is something that is pointed to in the Eastern spiritual cultures, traditions as well. They don't call it the soul, but it is that spark of life, that joyful awareness that is also related to healing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they do call, for some traditions, they do call it soul with different words, of course, but even like in the Tibetan tradition where it's all about, enlightenment and awareness, which is beyond the ego, there is still this idea of the La, which is our life force energy connected to our soul, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely illness arises when this has been lost.
Mm-hmm. And I read also fascinating excerpts from Jung on his studies with the indigenous cultures about soul recovery. And what Jung relates to this process is that it has to do with basically personal unconscious and the suppressed experiences that were not integrated into one's life. And then when it reaches a certain threshold, then a person loses a sense of direction, purpose, meaning in life. And so that is what in ancient times they refer to as the soul, soul loss. And actually now we are seeing that in connection to the psychosomatic healing, and in the Eastern tradition, it's also this reconciliation, right? So to be able to look through one's whole life, acknowledge one's ignorance, and then not judge it, but learn from it, right? And then learn how to have compassion for others as a result of that. But it's not about just denying oneself or denying one's life or who one used to be, but it's actually seeing how those are the building blocks. If I'm not young and stupid first, I cannot be old and wise later. I'll just be old and stupid later, right? So then it's essential to acknowledge that. And then I really love this quote by Socrates, who says that the awareness, well, actually, I kind of made it into my own quote, but he says that the awareness of ignorance is the beginning of wisdom. And my teachers would share with me something similar there, where the ignorance is the seed of wisdom, right? If we nurture it with awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fully. I like the perspective of the self-arising wisdom of the emotions and of ignorance, basically, which contains this kind of seed for wisdom, which pierces through, and kind of also the non-duality of samsara and nirvana, in a way, if we put it in Eastern perspective, it's kind of like the ignorance is part of the experience of awareness and of, essence. They're not, it's not like, I used to have this idea, as you mentioned, in my personal journey, like losing my personality. When I first got into spirituality, I was kind of having this idea that I had to kill my ego, that ego is this bad thing and it's something I should kill. And once I had this kind of an experience with altered states of consciousness of killing that ego, that's when I felt I completely lost my personality, my sense of humor, my playful essence, my childlike essence. And discovering, going deeper with that and exploring also the concept of the spiritual ego and discovering that that's completely missing the point.
Yeah, I really appreciate Jungian perspective that it's not about getting rid of the personality, but it's outgrowing it in a way. The personality is a certain container, a certain gestation womb for the self to mature within, and then to outgrow it doesn't mean that it's just no longer identifying, right? It's not about killing the ego, but it's no longer identifying. And it's interesting, this principle of non-duality within the indigenous traditions. Also, they don't have a concept of good and bad. They have a concept of heavy energy and a light energy, but one transforms into the other. And so then, in the Indian and also in the Amazonian medicine traditions, they have this principle of the Hucha and Sami, right? The heavy energy and the light energy. And then it is energy. So energy has a quality that allows it to transform. And without having the fuel of the heavy energy, it cannot transform into the light. Then also they have the principle of the Mother Earth and the Father Sun, those complementary opposites, and how life cannot exist without them. So it's fascinating how there is this relationship with awakening to the interconnectedness of life, to the complementary opposites uniting with each other. So it's this kind of awakening within these traditions that is happening initially on the outside, but then gradually it's brought into the inner qualities. So there is this mystery initiation that is taking place where we are starting to embody those qualities of the opposite complementary forces of nature that are also found inside of us. Sometimes it's easier to connect it from the outside first.
Yeah, fully. I can share something also. I mean, I'm from the Tibetan tradition, and also I've been studying Tibetan medicine, and there are this kind of polarity. There's these two energies. You can call it the female and male energy, which you can find in the Yab-Yum positions of tantric deities, where there's the masculine aspect and the feminine aspect, which represents energy. But there's also, from the Tibetan medicine perspective, the hot and the cold natures. And also relating to the two side channels, there's the masculine lunar channel and the feminine solar channel, because from that perspective, they consider the sun to be feminine, to be the oven for creating life. And they merge together in the central channel. And it's kind of, there's two, but they're kind of one in a way as well.
Kind of reminds me of the DNA helix. Right, it's this spiral of evolution that is taking place from the complementary forces, and then the myriads of possibilities that come from them, from the divine union, right? And so,
yeah, and I can also, I mean, I find this relevant also from the perspective of, as I would call it, the modern perspective towards spirituality and healing, where we convey the energies of Mother Earth and Father Sky. And when people get into spirituality, they tend to think, okay, I have to reach for the sky somehow. And that's kind of the ultimate view. And at the same time, like, if we look into the original traditions from who use this perspective, it's the combining of both. And I really feel also like many people who go into spirituality and medicine work, they can also bypass our human conditionings and human experience, which is more connected with the earth principle, to aim for this kind of blissful, open sky principle. And I think it's also important to bring back the two together. And I really love what Paititi does when you talk about embodying true nature. The embodying wording I find is very beautiful because it's kind of bringing these two polarities into our daily life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely there is this connection that continuously deepens, right? So then initially people have a certain idea, and I have to say I also started like that. I had all kinds of misconceptions, and then through trial and error, then starting to discover how, yeah, initially I really tried to reach for the sky, and then I would have very intense crashes, right? The higher I jump, the lower I land in a way. And so then I started understanding the meaning of balance in life, right? And so then the roots have to go just as deep as the trunk reaches to the sky, and it's simultaneously has to happen. Without that, life cannot exist. And so, of course, to embrace all the difficulties of life and also to appreciate all the joys. And what I see often happens in modern world, in this kind of comfortably numb existence, is that people prefer not to feel pain, and because of that, they cannot really appreciate the joys of life. And life is relatively comfortable and convenient, but then there's no mystery, no adventure, no challenge that is encouraging one to evolve, to engage with life, to discover one's own potential.
But it's funny because it's not an easy path, to really confront, to really get in confrontation with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if we put this from the Buddhist perspective, that's why there are different paths for different types of people. And there's the path of renunciation of the Mahayana, which is more about renunciating life. And so being a monk and, kind of not having to deal with our everyday emotions, with anger, with desire, and all these things that really consume us or have this potential to consume us. And when we go into Vajrayana, which is about transforming energy, transforming the emotions, it's considered to be a more difficult, and they even qualify it as a more dangerous path. Mm-hmm. Because as you said, the more high you go, the more low you fall in a way. Right. And it's not for everyone.
Yeah, and also there are certain stages, right, of realization. In the Amazon tradition, it's the same thing. First, people go into an isolation where they're not as prone to distraction and all kinds of triggers and things like that, and then they are able to take responsibility. Otherwise, I'm always able to blame something for what I'm going through, right? In everyday world, there's so many different distractions and triggers and situations, but then going into isolation with oneself, then at a certain point I have no one to blame but myself. And that is the foundation of the healing process. Then once there is that acknowledgement, then it's possible to start engaging with transforming those inner forces. But at first, I am just a leaf in the wind. I'm a victim of my external circumstances, and there's always something happening that I can blame. And initially taking that time, then gradually, through that understanding, starting to find the capacity to deal with the issues, right? So I find it really fascinating, this connection to healing and awakening, how it's this awakening of the heart in a way that is related to in these traditions, right? It's this joyful, present, open, awakened state. And so then in these traditions, they're very practical, these traditions. You know, they're not about this fluffy love and floating in the clouds and everything is rainbows and unicorns and all kinds of things like that. They deal with harsh life situations. And so for the indigenous people, for them, this heart awakened state to be so essential basically means that with that, they could thrive within their communities in very harsh situations. The heart-centered presence allows for objectivity in our lives. When I'm totally taken by disturbing emotions, by anxiety, by fear, by stress, then I'm not able to see things clearly. And so that is directly connected to healing, where clear sight, the awakened presence, then allows the healing potential to find a way through. And I find that throughout my own journey, how I had to really struggle at times to bring the heart-centered awareness into focus, and then suddenly all the remedies would become available. But when I would do it from a place of fear and anxiety, it doesn't matter. I would still, maybe I would use the same remedies and they would not be effective. And in the medicine Buddha lineage practice in Tibet, they say that basically it's through this awakened heart wisdom that you suddenly receive instantaneous access to all of the medicines, all of the minerals and substances from all around the universe. You find a connection to them. So it's fascinating how there is a very direct connection in the Amazon and in other parts of the world. And I think if we look into the history of even the Western healing, right, and we can see how it was very much involved with philosophy and deep life contemplation, finding greater meaning in one's life, and only then the healing would be possible.
Yeah, I think we can I can bounce on what you've been sharing I think it's relevant to define these two ideas we're talking of, awakening and healing, because I guess depending on culture, depending on circumstances, each person, each individual has a different understanding of what is mentioned when we say healing and when it is mentioned when it is awakening. And you kind of introduce that, but I think it's also important to really to contextualize our conversation, to really define or try to define what this means for us today in this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so healing, what does healing means? We've already defined awakening a bit. And so what does healing mean? So of course, today people may have very different idea about it. Some people think of healing as just fixing this body as a machine and just replacing some parts. And that's what healing is about. And then, of course, we are starting to see more and more now how it's not really like that, where the Western medicine in today's world, it's based on treating symptoms mostly, and not really the root cause, and how many different, if not all ancient holistic traditions were focusing on understanding the cause root of illness. And so definitely there is that duality that is happening.
Completely. And I feel like when we talk about healing, we talk about getting something. Like there's something missing. As you said, there is a part of the soul which is lost and we kind of need to retrieve it. And when we engage in healing work, and I guess this kind of word is very much used in today's spiritual medicine networks and communities, you know, And somehow, if we go from the perspective of awareness, the base of our condition is harmonious. There's no healing needed somehow. It's already, harmony is the base of our being. Mm-hmm. And when we seek healing is kind of removing, at least for me, how I consider it is removing the obstacles to abiding and relaxing in that state of harmony and presence. Mm-hmm. But there's also, it's a very interesting topic because it's multi-layered. Like when illness arises, it's actually saying something. It's not just, oh, I ate too much fries and Coca-Cola and so I get an illness, or I practice yoga every day, but I still have a cancer. And I was really surprised, for example, recently a friend of mine who is a longtime yoga teacher, and she's not even 50, and she died of a breast cancer. It's just, okay, what is healing and what is illness somehow? And I really loved what you shared at Paititi about illness being a mother in the indigenous traditions. If I'm saying it correctly, is that how you would define it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The relationship with illness is very different than in the West today, where it's not seen as something random, and it's not seen as an enemy that is out to destroy, but it is seen as a wake-up call, as a message, a very deep lesson from Mother Nature. Very deep, right? It's like this, deep inside. And then the process is to really develop a deeper connective with one's own intuitive wisdom, with the language of the organism. And of course, that is also not the end goal, because inevitably, I mean, sickness is something that is part of this
human condition
and impermanent life. And so it's not like, okay, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to become immortal and live forever. I mean, maybe it's possible, but that's not even the main point. And then not to waste one's limited life on something that is not the main point, right? Because yeah, maybe it's possible, maybe thousands of years ago people were able to do it, but the point is to connect to something that is unconditional. And that's how I see in all of these traditions it is pointed to, that beyond all of the concepts and ideas and names and words are the unconditional qualities that go beyond this mortal plane. And so the heart wisdom in all of these traditions is related to as a portal, as a doorway into the infinite human potential, into the unconditional human nature. And what does that basically mean, right? Unconditional, where in our modern world, mostly today, what is happening is that I am directly affected by the outer conditions in my life, and by the compound reality. And so I'm constantly affecting. My inner state is affected by everything that is happening in my life. And in the ancient traditions, where I can share in the Amazonian, in the Indian, in the Himalayan tradition, that was a focus of the spiritual practice, where the inner state can transform the outer conditions, rather than the outer conditions dominate the inner state. And so then in the Amazon, people say, my elders would tell me that doesn't matter how sick anyone is, if there is enough willpower, if there's enough will to live, then it will be possible to heal. Somebody can have very minor illness, but not enough will to live, and they will not be able to heal it. And this focus, right, on the essential meaning of life that goes beyond conditions. And so that is something that all those ancient cultures unite between themselves, and it's more essential than immortalizing one's physical body.
Completely. And I really like what you said about the illness being a wake-up call. And I'm happy to also share that from the perspective of modern transpersonal psychology, there is this understanding of illness and even like difficult life circumstances as being a wake-up call, or kind of, it's just the magic of life bringing a message. And if we don't get it the first time, it will come back even stronger and stronger, and this kind of spiraling from, like in transpersonal psychology, we call this the coex systems, as Groff coined this term. And it's basically a contraction of energy of a wound which contains an information, and throughout our life it will come back. It might be a breakup with our girlfriend, it might be the death of a loved one, it might be a car accident, it might be a cancer. And all this is contained as part of the wake-up calls of life to really heal and to come back to that state of harmony. And as long as we're not able to, or if it's not ripe in this lifetime to open up and to really confront this wound, it will just keep on perpetuating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the wounds. I love how in the Tibetan tradition, Chogyam Trungpa related to the wounds as something sacred, that in the world today we often judge the wounds, the traumas, the pains in our lives, but they're actually showing the capacity of our organism to heal. They are directly showing the vulnerability, the tenderness, and the healing power of nature that comes through that. So I find it fascinating what you talk about contraction. That's this kind of crystallized energy that creates a blockage, right? A stagnation. For the indigenous people also, there is an energy channel. How can we allow it to flow? And so the body keeps holding certain energies that it doesn't know how to process, how to integrate, how to engage with, and then it keeps holding. It's like this scar tissue that is solidified around the wound as a protection. And it's becoming very tough, but inside there's something very tender. And so then in these traditions, that's also a way to find it. I'm going to look for those most hardened places in myself, and that's how I know that there's something that is so tender and so soft.
Yeah, and the beautiful poetry of life is this tenderness contains the seed of awakening, and also like puts this kind of relationship between the two.
Yeah, something that is so tender initially grows up into a millennial tree that protects the whole rainforest, right? That's the legend of the Lupuna tree in the Amazon rainforest, right? How this immense tree saved the rainforest, but it started as a tiny sprout. And fascinating about healing, a fascinating quote that I recently came across on Facebook. I like to use Facebook for meaningful quotes. So there's a quote from Jung. You might have heard that it's from his work on alchemy. And he said there that only that which destroys itself is truly alive. And so it's a very interesting saying, right? And a lot of people were very confused by that quote. But again, like what I say, it relates to alchemy. And so only that which destroys itself is truly alive. And we can see how in all of these traditions, right, whether we talk about the Amazonian tradition, ayahuasca is death and rebirth. The alchemy tradition often has been depicted in ancient times as a phoenix rising from its own ashes. Right, so there is this death and rebirth that is also part of the healing. Right, the healing process in the Amazon, I have to die to my old self, to my old habits that no longer serve me. And so it relates to this outgrowing oneself, right? It's like this phoenix rising from its own ashes. And so I contemplated on that because of course we all have, I mean, at least I have, some self-destructive tendencies and those coping mechanisms, avoidance mechanisms. And then reflecting on this process of course, in the Tibetan lineage, which I've also been practicing for over 2 decades, there's all kinds of practices that are pointing to that and relate to that, like chod, where you have to visualize destroying yourself, your limited self, your idea of limited self. And so it's also fascinating how the healing has to do with this small death and the rebirth in one's life. So this is something that, I've been contemplating, how the healing is very much the death and rebirth, and then discovering that which destroys itself, because the true nature, in these traditions, it can never be destroyed. That which is true is indestructible. It has never been born, will never die. It's this pure awareness that is looking through our eyes and listening through our ears. But there is a process of, in a way, peeling the layers, awakening from conditioning, from the illusion of separation. And so I find that it's the separation that prevents the energy from flowing, right? The interconnectedness in one's own being and also in the outer, and everything is serving as a mirror, as above, so below. And alchemy, of course, it is the mother of modern medicine. So yeah, so I just wanted to share and see if you have some.
Yeah, I mean, it's what came to my mind about this destruction aspect, and even in the church tradition, and is opening up. How I see it is a lot about if we take it from a perspective of energy or of the channels. For example, in Eastern traditions, we talk about the central channel, which connects to the opening. It's emerging just 3-4 fingers below the navel, and it opens like how do you say this, entonnoir, like a tube around the crown area. Although this energy is constantly flowing, the horizontal energy, when there's a knot, this central channel will not be flowing harmoniously, and somehow it needs to be reabsorbed in itself to really open, and feels like kind of I really like to see it also in terms of the merging, the connection between healing and awakening is, I really see it in this horizontal vertical axis, where if as much as we want to aspire towards verticality, towards opening to consciousness, awareness, spirit, if we have knots along the way, the energy will not flow. And so the importance of untying these knots, and also that's where healing comes into place. And I really see a lot of, I've been like also in many spiritual communities, which with lineages, traditions of, particularly of Tibetan Buddhism and Dzogchen. And I notice, and I've heard stories, and it can be an easy way to try to escape from our humanity and our wounds and conditionings, to aspire to this kind of everything is perfect perspective, and to justify everything in life with that. Mm-hmm. I do notice as well that if we don't do some form of inner work, and I know that traditionally in these practices, there are practices which work on untying these knots to allow the energy to flow. Although in our modern fast food culture, we kind of take everything and want to reach to the top level immediately, like this instant fix, bypassing this whole journey of untying these knots, this energy, and it will come back. I noticed this for myself, as much as, I can, use mantras or visualizations or practices to integrate. And of course, if I dedicate my whole life to that, I have full confidence that I can, like, that this energy will open. although because we live in modern society with like information, with a smartphone, with this kind of so many distractions, it's not the same. We're not just in the mountains, in the fields all day and having like infinite time to do whatever we want. And yeah, I mean, even in community, in like spiritual communities, in Buddhist communities, I have heard of people suiciding, which kind of, it's really, it's not enough to just try to, you know, kind of hide all our wounds and human difficulties, and to just aim to pure awareness, bypassing this whole conditionings. That's what I really appreciate about like the high level teachings. And also in transpersonal psychology, we encounter this perspective. Transpersonal, trans means beyond, but it also means through. And it's not just beyond personal, it's through the personal. It's opening from within and integrating our whole being. And in the Dzogchen teachings, for example, of the tradition, of the Tibetan traditions, it's the same idea. It's kind of beyond mind, but it integrates, it involves, and that's what I mentioned before, the non-duality of samsara and nirvana, or the non-duality of duality and non-duality. So it's not about going towards this kind of emptiness and just, this is not how we live. Like, we are human beings, we have emotions, we have life circumstances, and we have to deal with them. And if you're just like, I don't know, it was the story of I think it was you who was telling me the story of this guy, maybe it's not, but I think it was you, but this guy who started doing with his wife, they were practicing together, and he was really into these accumulating mantras, and he was with his mala every day, like chanting mantras. And then there was like difficulties with his relationship, and he was just keeping up with the mantras, and till at the end of the day, or after some time, his wife leaves him and she goes away, and he's still there like with his mala, and he's not dealing with his present circumstances. You know, it's kind of, it's easy to lose track of what is important and what is real.
No, it wasn't me. I didn't tell that story.
Okay.
But yeah, for sure. Definitely, there is this, pretense. Maybe like people like to go like, yeah, I'm gonna play a new video game. I'm gonna become a Buddhist, or I'm gonna become a shaman, and I'm gonna get like special feathers and all the special devices that and the mala or whatever, and I'm gonna just pretend, and I'm gonna hide. I'm gonna run away from myself, and I'm gonna pretend like I'm this character. I'm a practitioner, and I'm in a monastery or something, but then using that to avoid oneself. And it doesn't matter, wherever I go, there I am, right? And like for someone, it may be beneficial to just keep working with the mala while their wife leaves. Maybe that's the renunciation that they've taken. But in general, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like going to some kind of a distant enlightenment goal and forgetting to enjoy the little things in life, to smell the roses on the way, to appreciate the people, the experiences, the situation, to find meaning in the mud of being here on earth rather than already teleporting to the sky. And so the journey is the destination. And of course, I see how what you're saying is with all of my teachers, and both in the Amazon, in the Andes, and also the Tibetan teachers that I've had. And I've met many different Tibetan masters, but only with very few I felt a more direct connection. And I'm not saying that the other, it's just there was no connection. And what I really liked about the teachers that I've had was that they were straightforward and not beating around the bush. And what I learned from these teachers is that basically consciousness is the main healing agent. Everything else can support consciousness, but nothing can substitute it. And so then to get real with myself, and then my teacher, like my teachers in Tibet, the guidance was always, first, really be with yourself. Acknowledge your own life, your own ignorance, difficulties, contemplate on the impermanence of human existence, on the cause and effect, how I myself plant the cactuses that I end up sitting on, how I cannot really bring benefit to others if I'm confused and disturbed myself. And so to really sit with that and contemplate before I do some kind of a mala official meditation, visualization, and visualizing the thousands of Buddhas in all kinds of dimensions. But then at first to just connect with my own life and get real with myself and see what is it all about. I can fantasize and go into all kinds of rose-colored dreams, but I have to get real with myself first. And I find that to be missing definitely today in both, you mentioned the Vajrayana, the Tibetan tradition, or, the Amazonian tradition, where people just go to feel special and to drink medicine and to dress in white and to, pretend like they're already enlightened, and at the same time not face oneself. And so I do see how it is also something that is part of human condition, is to avoid anything can be either a poison or a medicine, right? We're on a healing topic, and
Sure.
again, it's like that which can destroy can also heal, right?
Yeah, you mentioned also before the practice of Che in the Vajrayana or in the Buddhist tradition, where it's about cutting the crown of the head and making a fire and inviting different classes of beings, and particularly demons. And to bring this in context to what you were saying, there's many sorts of demons in that perspective, from the transmission of Machi Labdron, who transmitted this teaching. And these four demons, what is very interesting is they are all perceived to be an aspect of oneself. And the main demon is attachment. And this is kind of, we tend to have all these obstacles and difficulties on the outside, and it always comes back to really just integrating oneself completely throughout our own demons, in a way.
Yeah, the main demon, I remember, is called the demon of self-absorption, is the special son of the gods, which basically relates to this special me, and and how I'm so special, I don't have to deal with the suffering that everyone else are dealing with. And I'm going to win a lottery, and I don't have to deal with it. So definitely it's this.
It gets more complex, because one of the demons, I think it's the third one, relates
more complex.
It relates to humility. And a lot of practitioners in the Himalayas who practice Chit, this is one of the most difficult demons, which is about pride. When you kind of reach to a certain sparkling state, and you have developed a capacity, and you go and you use, because the Chödpa practitioners that were used also to heal the community. They would travel, they were like nomads, and they would go in communities and do the practice to eliminate disharmonious energies. But once they were recognized as being high-level practitioners, there's this view of, oh, this person is like important, is powerful. And this creates the third demon, which relates to pride, and the other side of it is humility. And to avoid that, they would usually consider that their job is done and they would go to another place to avoid this kind of attention, you know, because it's a very, like, although we heal and we reach levels spiritually or whatever, and we're always kind of dancing, you know, with power comes responsibility, and it's a very interesting aspect, which I'm still also personally discovering, you know, throughout my life, you know.
Yeah, for sure. There are many pitfalls and this like elaborate self-deception, right? I call it the elaborate self-deception manufactured for collective consumption. But it's a very subtle trickery of this conditioned existence, this illusory sense of separate self, which brings the self-absorption, the pride, the self-pity, and all of the disturbing emotions. And again, the awareness, right? To become aware of the subtle workings of illusion. And that's another thing that in today's world is this quick fix. I just want to fix it and I don't have any other issue and I don't want to deal with it. And someone else take care of it for me. And then in the ancient traditions of healing, one has to become responsible for one's own healing journey. So I have to understand the workings of conditioning in order to find myself out of the labyrinth of self-deception. And awareness is vital for that process to happen, right? It's this hero's journey, the rite of passage. It's so essential in one's life not to just follow some kind of a manual, but to actually connect with one's own inherent wisdom and clear sight, so to speak. And so in today's world, it's kind of also something to watch out for, where we love to talk about enlightenment. I have one teacher who he jokes, he says, so many people talk today about the power of now and the love and the compassion and this power of presence, but nobody likes to talk about the power of old habits and past unresolved experiences, unintegrated situations, past traumas, all kinds of coping mechanisms and avoidances. People don't talk about the power that is in all of those factors. And without actually recovering the power, right, our soul is trapped in our personal history that is not being acknowledged, not being integrated. And then because of that, we lose all of that power. And of course, also what you share with the pride. So that's, you know, especially in the Amazon, you know, when I was 20 years ago, I was young and I saw how some of the most powerful teachers, they often had a very big ego. Like, I'm the best and the only one. And whether they're acknowledged or not, and then it kind of becomes a competition, or like everyone have to prove, and it's like this competitive market and the shamans are fighting with each other. So definitely, I know even without that acknowledgement, it's like, well, I know so much and I've done so much and nobody acknowledges me and I'm so important, right? And then that takes all of the energy. And then I would see how the elders that would be so powerful and had the wisdom, but then they would be taken by pride. And then they would get sick because the pride takes so much energy. I have to keep maintaining a certain image. I have to keep maintaining a certain authority figure and a way that people supposed to see me and look. I have to be someone in someone else's eyes. And that takes all the energy that is otherwise necessary for healing, for maintaining a healthy organism.
Mm-hmm.
Same with self-pity, right? Two sides of the same coin. On one side is like, I'm so special and I'm so important and I deserve so much more and nobody acknowledges me and I'm so nice and I'm doing so much, but and on the other side, it's like the world is against me and I'm not appreciated and I'm not being given but what I deserve. And I'm so poor and miserable and I'm a victim of my circumstances and I'm just crying in my pillow because of that. And it's the same coin, right? Once one side self-pity, the other side self-importance, but it's self-absorption, right? It comes down to that. And so definitely this interconnectedness, the awareness of interconnectedness, the greater whole, not just living for one's own sake, helps to liberate, right? The unconditional nature.
Yeah, completely. For me, one very convincing concept and practical idea from the traditions of Tibet is why aim towards awareness or abiding, and always going back to dedicating the merits of our practice and of our existence for the benefit of all beings, basically. And I guess from my experiences with the indigenous of the, for example, of the Amazon and of these regions, they perhaps also due to many factors, many lineages have been broken because of the conquistadors or whatever we call them. And I feel like it loses that idea of why we are engaging in this kind of work. And I don't want to make a generality to really generalization, but often I feel like this element lacks and gives power to why continuously engage in basically abiding in presence. Like the meaning of that, of not just reaching states of powerful capacities from the use of plant medicines or spiritual work, but to really use that to really be of benefit.
Yeah, connecting, making it relevant, because definitely just to make it an exponent in the museum doesn't make sense. And of course, I see that there is this essence that is presented through many different ancient lineages and traditions in the world. And then, of course, also throughout the time, these traditions themselves, they have changed and adapted to the different circumstances that the people lived in. So the essence of basically allowing the human spirit to shine in the face of adversity has to remain the same. But how that looks like in particular circumstances of our current existence, that will be different. We can't just pretend to, wear feathers and run around naked in the modern cities and think that that will solve all of our problems, right? But then to find a connecting point, how that relates on the level of being, on the level of qualities, on the level of human values that we exist in today. So in all of these traditions, the healing is not just something mechanical, but it has to come through essential human qualities, through profound human values in life. And that restores the balance, the dynamic equilibrium. Marco, yeah, so I just wanted to share that we'll start after you talk. We'll start taking some questions and comments from our friends in the audience, and then we'll continue and reflect with that.
The last thing I wanted to add was this idea of healing and awakening. What I discovered, and also through my teachers have been reminded of, is it's not a one-time fix-all thing. It's also impermanent, and I discovered this in my everyday life, how it's an ongoing process of really cultivating. It's not, oh, I'm awake and this is I'm always awake. No, awake. I mean, I'm not even sure awakening is the right word. Maybe awakening is the initial spark of openness to our true nature. Although we like awakening happens every moment, and we will, as like being a human, like as human beings, we will lose that awakened state because it's part of the nature of our mind to just go in movement. And I really also feel the need to highlight the importance of cultivating this perpetually and integrating healing and awakening or awareness in a state of instant presence as a fundamental idea.
That's the main focus, right? It's, of course, it's not this spiritual materialism where I'll reach a certain state and I'll float on a cloud and then I'll have no issues ever again in my life and I'll live happily ever after. So that's spiritual materialism. But yeah, that's a very good point that you bring. And it is this, in the Amazon, they talk about that as this state of connection, interconnectedness, right? They refer to it as the Aini, or the awakening the channel of love, right? Where you become connected through the channel of love. And that connection has to be maintained through awareness. And somebody asked me once, I think in a talk long ago, somebody asked me, well, there is no mention of awareness. The indigenous people, they talk about interconnectedness. Yeah, in the Amazon, in the Andes, in the Northern Native American tradition, there is the principle of interconnectedness, but they don't talk about awareness. But actually, without awareness, they would just be eaten. Right? It's very simple. These people, they live in such harsh circumstances that they don't have to talk about awareness. That is something that is taken for granted, because without awareness, they will be eaten. The interconnectedness will eat them. Right? So, of course, there is the awareness, the continuous awareness. And then the awakening keeps deepening, because then I can start seeing the interconnectedness on deeper and deeper levels. My elders in Amazon, they would walk barefoot through the rainforest with shushupis all around, the most poisonous snake in the world, 10 times more poisonous than cobra. And they walk around barefoot with awareness. And as long as they're aware, they will not step on the cobra's nest. And not only that, but it's not just the awareness that is circumstantial awareness. Yeah, I'm just aware of my circumstances, but it's the awareness of what that shushupi, what's that poisonous snake, is the bushmaster, right? It's called. What does that represent inside of me? What force of nature I have inside of me that relates to this outer manifestation? And then if they're in balance and harmony, if they're aware of that force, then they will not be beaten by it. And they are very convinced. And I've tested it with them many times. So yeah, the awareness in the Tibetan tradition, also there are references to this Rigpa, right? The awareness of the true nature, of the unconditional state. And then what is mentioned is basically complete openness, right? It's not, we don't have to make it very fancy. It's just complete openness. And then within that moment of complete openness, all diseases are instantly healed. But then the moment that I lose that complete openness, all the conditions, they come back instantaneously. And so then what they refer to as this process, as this state of a liberated state that can never be lost, is basically training oneself to continuously be aware of openness, to do that. And in the Amazon also, that's the main thing that you can get out. You can have thousands of ceremonies and it will not serve you any good. And actually what happens is that in the Amazonian tradition, they say that, yeah, it's this, the plant medicines, they are doors. And so then I can open myself up and I can become aware. And then through the awareness, I cultivate the attitude, right? That's the only thing that you can cultivate. You can cultivate in the Tibetan tradition, it's called the enlightened attitude. I cannot like get a medal from the ceremony and that will signify that I'm enlightened. The only thing I can cultivate is like, I'm going to keep opening up. I'm going to keep facing. I'm not going to run away from myself. I'm going to open my heart. I'm going to keep doing it over and over and over and over again. And I'm not going to throw in the towel. And so that kind of attitude is the only thing that you can cultivate. Experiences come and go. I can have the most enlightening experiences and I turn around and I'm more lost than ever. But the attitude of openness, curiosity, not getting lost in the drama, that is the main focus in the Amazonian, Andean tradition. Our Quero elder, Juan Gabriel, I just saw him yesterday. He's saying hello to everyone. It's the same thing, you know, like you have to keep a smile, like everything is crashing down. You have to keep a noble heart smile on and keep engaging with life and not get despaired by it. And they live in very harsh circle. I've seen like farm animals live better than those people, and they actually maintain a more noble quality than most Westerners that I know, right? Because of that connection to awareness, not getting lost, right, in the world of appearances. So yeah, so very good point. Thank you, Marco. Okay, let's see. The healing journey for me is recognizing the disappointments I carry for not getting what I feel needed. And what if our needs are not as important of us being needed? That's also, I find that to be true. I can wallow in my misery and just think about everything that I need and I don't have. And suddenly a friend reaches out to me for help and I know that they're in much greater trouble than I am. And I totally forget about my misery and I actually find joy in the capacity to be of benefit and to help. So yeah, I resonate with that very much. I saw this quote by, I really love this Japanese director, Akira Kurosawa, who made like movies about samurais, really old ones. And I saw a quote by him recently that says, by protecting others, you save yourself. And so that definitely is a good way, of course, not to do it just to avoid oneself and run away from oneself, but to find the connection and not to just focus on the issues, right? I find that, yeah, it's essential to acknowledge the issue. Without acknowledging the dis-ease, it's not possible to heal it, but then not only to focus on what is bothersome, but also to connect with the unconditional quality, with the openness, not to just obsess with what is wrong, but to see that what is that in me that can fully embrace it, that can transform it, that can open it. And then if I'm not able to manage something, I'm not able to handle it, then it's that part of me that cannot handle it, the conditioned part of me, which I can also acknowledge, and then also acknowledge the unconditional. Let me know if you want to share something, Mark.
No, I think I'm good. I was also looking at the questions and and I guess then there's Kylie sharing about this idea of need. And then there's some things. There's one question which what do you think about the fundamentals of humility? Yeah, there's two questions, one from Emily and one from John Mark, I believe. These are the two questions. I would like to share
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fine line between self-confidence and humility. You're gonna let's look it up.
You can, I'll read the question just so that it's clear. Is that the one? What do you think about the fine line between self-confidence and humility, especially in systems or scenarios where people have been oppressed, disempowered, told to be small, quiet, obedient? There seems to be a backlash where people step into their confidence and power, but perhaps get off track of the spiritual journey of humility, connection, and compassion.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's indeed a fine line, but at the same time, they are kind of the same thing, is having confidence in our humility as this radiance of our childlike nature, which is clear. So it doesn't really, like, it's like going into my power and having confidence in the heart, which has the quality of humility. It's kind of the same thing for me.
So Marco, yeah, if I can comment on that a little bit, because
yes.
that I feel touches upon what the indigenous people in the Amazon and also in the northern America relate to as the original illness, right? In northern Native Americans, they call it wetigo or windigo. In the Amazon, they call it the disease of forgetfulness. And they talk about it as the original illness where humanity started to forget the wisdom of the heart and started to get lost in greed, anger, rage, separation, conflict, war. And that has occurred in very ancient times and has been deteriorating ever since. And I've had a great friend, a teacher, an elder who passed away years ago. He was the great grandson of Crazy Horse of the Lakotas, and he was sharing with me. He also had this a prophecy that he was keeping about the union of the condor and the eagle, and in his lineage it was supposed to happen in Panama Canal. But he talked to me about this original illness, and what he shared with me was that today many people, they start to fight, and then, you know, for their essence, for their heritage, but then they become what they fight against in the process, and then they become themselves infected with the same illness of aggression, of separation, of judgment. And so, you know, for this elder, also another great elder from the north, from the Lakotas, Henry Red Cloud, also shared with me that, yeah, the elders, they don't give themselves to this disease, so they never create this separation so that the healing of humanity can happen. And Jung also, he had this quote that comes from Jung, where the curse, it's something I'm paraphrasing here, but the curse of the previous generation becomes the god of the next one. And basically it relates to this process of, like, you know, just because I have been abused in the past, that gives me the right to be aggressive to others, right? So there is this dynamic that that is referred to. And so, of course, you know, it's essential not to go from one extreme to another. And in these traditions, the golden middle is cultivated, and it's hard within our environment and circumstances. But I also see how it connects to this, you know, often avoiding oneself as well. I can't stand up as just myself. I have to hide behind maybe my ethnic background. I have to hide behind my political affiliation. I have to hide behind my religious affiliation. I have to hide behind what the government is saying I'm supposed to be doing. And everyone else are against it because they challenge, they basically blow the cover of me not being able to be with myself, as myself. And I need to hide behind some kind of a group or power in place, or I need to fight against some kind of a group or power. And yeah, in my life, I've encountered, and I'm sure you have as well, I've encountered persecution and racism, and I've been a refugee. But actually, you know, in my own life, that taught me to actually be myself and not identify with any of those things, and also to have compassion for all sides of the matter, because I see that it all comes from ignorance and fear, and
Completely.
then there's a trauma there that all of humanity is dealing with.
Yeah, I want to share also a beautiful example of embodiment of this kind of what you just talked about is the Dalai Lama, or other, for example, also Shokalam Kanobu, my Tibetan teacher. There are people who have lost their country, their families, their whole childhood, playgrounds and valleys and nature, and yet they kind of go back to this childlike. I mean, the Dalai Lama, when you look at him, I really see this kind of smiling child, which recognizes this kind of which understands basically the root of all which is happening, and is not engaging in the vertigo as you mentioned it, rather going back to the heart.
And of course, you know, like my first Tibetan root teacher, he spoke about, you know, it's not about, you know, being in the heart doesn't mean that I have to always give the other cheek, and I can't stand up for myself or for my family or for people that I find dear, but not to do it from a place of hatred, because hatred will never eliminate hatred, and it just breeds more hatred. So definitely doesn't mean that, yeah, it's all about the heart and we're not gonna, you know, do anything and protect, you know, our dignity and our value and what is dear and sacred to us, but not to get lost in the sickness of hatred. Because I really like this saying from Tibet that, you know, it's like hating someone else is like drinking poison and waiting for them to die from it. So it doesn't really help anyone. So yeah, but I really find it meaningful to keep reflecting, you know, on deeper sources of collective illness and how it plays out uniquely through each of us, but the sources are shared, like the sense of separation. Okay, another question. As healers, how do we help others suffering from illness to transcend a mentality of self-pity? And why me into seeing illness as a gift and potentially a portal into greater awakening? I find that people can get offended when speaking like this, as if you are saying that their disease is their fault. Yeah, a really good one. A really good question. And yeah, definitely is this perspective of, if I'm sick, then something is wrong with me or something I'm doing wrong. Where in the indigenous traditions, that's not really how they see that. If you get sick, that automatically, you know, kind of like you get a fail on your exam or something. They see it more as an evolutionary message and not something to judge oneself for or to blame or others for, but actually seeing how it is also a collective. We heal through each other. So honoring people through their healing process and recognizing that there is this wisdom that is awakening through their being, through their life, not seeing the sickness as some kind of a compartmentalized thing that is disconnected from everything else in one's life. But seeing how, yeah, in my situation, when I started, I had this genetic, incurable in Western medicine illness that is chronic and in many cases ends up terminal. And it was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. I was sick with it long before. And for a long time, I thought of it as a curse. I have this curse and something is wrong with me, and I'm so poor and miserable and nobody understands me and nothing is working out and I'm being punished for something and I don't even know for what. And I'm just a child. What did I do to deserve it? And so then over time, I started seeing how that was a huge blessing in disguise, that I did not see it at that time, because it took me out of a very generic life, very conditioned existence with no higher purpose and meaning, very narrow tunnel vision and total lack of spirituality. And it made me actually question my own existence and life. And then that brought me onto the path that I'm on right now and allowed me to step out from this kind of very paved pathway of society and go on a journey of discovery and adventure and seeing how I can be most beneficial, not just as an ant on a conveyor belt. And yeah, without that, I wouldn't have been so fortunate to tap into the ancestral wisdom and to receive the guidance and the wisdom of my teachers from different parts of the world. So that was a huge blessing that at a time I thought of as a curse. So then my teachers taught me not to judge, and if someone is really going through it, then to actually honor them through it and to recognize how that can become a blessing in disguise together with them, and to support them in them recovering their soul first and foremost. So we are human beings, we're not human doings. And that's something that my teachers taught me, that instead of this mentality, I'm going to heal and then I'm going to be happy. First, I have to be happy. I have to be, not, maybe happy is not the right word, but I have to find contentment. I have to come to peace with it so that then I can heal, because that brings the heart into the picture. You want me to continue, Marco?
Yeah, I think on that question also, to have a more practical or at least in therapy, for example, if you're engaging in therapy, it's a very delicate topic, how to really help the other recognizing that they are kind of creating their own illnesses. And it's, as you said, it requires to honor the person and to really bring in this kind of reconnection to oneself. And I know it's a topic which is it's not like, for example, I know someone who was sharing about the psychosomatic side or perspective of cancer, and to go tell someone who suffers from cancer that they are creating this illness for themselves is a very delicate topic. And I feel for me what also it requires is a lot of gentleness and sharing from one's own experience, and also grounding with ancestral lineages which perceive this from that perspective, which can help also to not be like, oh, I'm just saying this to you because that's how I see it. You know, it's kind of, there's a world, there's a view based in lineages, basically trial and error. It's teacher and student, and there's the transmission and goes on with it. And to highlight that when engaging with I don't like to call them patients, but like people who need support. One of my teachers called them actions instead of patients, because it's kind of engages them. It gets them to engage with their own process. And I feel like it's this can be used as well, because I also have encountered that, it's kind of like the Buddha teaches that life is like a big dream. But go tell this to a mother who just lost her daughter, her son. Oh, it's just a dream. Relax. It's okay. Like, it doesn't work that way. And it's a very, like, it requires us to really dig into our own, compassion and skillful means to really welcome that and hold it in ourselves, to be able to hold it for the other and to communicate it with gentleness and in a way that it relates to that person.
Beautifully put. Yeah, definitely. So I like with what you shared, this, to like with cancer, for example, like at first to start deconstructing this rigid idea of what cancer is and how it's not just the outer manifestation, right? But then encouraging people to see their own emotions, their own life, their own being, because that's something that is often kept away from one's own eye, right? It's like the eye that doesn't see itself. And of course, if you come and you tell someone, oh, you're creating that cancer, but for them it's just the outer manifestation, then, they'll be upset. But then to start to see how it has to do with energy and one's personality and one's being and attitude towards life and how it's all interconnected, then it becomes possible. So of course, that idea of like the disease is the enemy and it has to be destroyed, eliminated, killed, and poisoned at any price, even the price of the life of a patient, that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, and I guess you learned that the hard way in the Amazon, no? When they just left you for 8 months without anything to write on, to anything to engage to. And
yeah, that's the old school. It's like, okay, if you have it in you, you will heal. If you don't, you will not. But then it kind of like makes me responsible. Oh, I can't just rely that someone else will do it for me. They'll support me, but it's up to me to actually keep that spark alive, the will for life. So yeah, it's different today. Of course, we can't do it in that way today. But in the ancient times, that was more like that, definitely. And that brings a lot more self-responsibility. Like, yeah, I can die and I cannot blame anyone for it. And here I am. And this is what I'm doing. So that's more the old approach. Another
we have
question.
2 shares from Ian and Natalie, and there's a question from Justin, and there's Joseph with his hand raised.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm just gonna go through them quick and then see if we can tie them together into infinite knot. So what do you think, which is another thing about the knot and the illness and the infinite knot in the Tibetan tradition? How, if the self-liberating power of afflictions. It's also something I encourage you guys who are listening to check into. What do you think about the Fandata? We went through that as healers. Okay, I'm really into the story of the Tibetan monk who people from all around the world went to see for advice. The man who has everything but wants more, and the woman who gives everything and has nothing. Her lesson was about emptying our emotional cup before we could truly learn. I approach the story from every side, and I am the perspective of the man who has everything and the woman who gives everything. Depending on the situation, I'm healing. This chat has helped me understand not only do we have to empty our cups of our attachments to the medicine, but also the energetic emotion to be able to take an appropriate lesson into our life. Our cups can be full of anything that prevents us from taking a lesson. Even when we are empty, it's up to us to recognize when we are holding our cups upside down. begging for more, and how to correct the tools so we can utilize them better. Beautiful. Yeah, so definitely beginner's mind is very essential for healing. It also relates to the heart subjectivity and the guidance I received from my teachers in Amazon initially, that before I can even learn, I have to learn how to learn, which involves a lot of unlearning, of course. And so, yeah, of course, this has to do with openness and with opening, but it's not the openness from my experience of like a totally clean slate, but it's the openness of the child who is curious, who has ingenuity, who wishes to engage and explore and find deeper meaning, right? So deeper and deeper meaning, right? So it's that kind of ingenuity and curiosity that in these traditions is related to beginner's mind, and often people misinterpret it as this kind of like just totally numb, blank, formatted computer drive. But no, it's this beginner's mind that is alive and awake and is engaging and learning and humble, receptive, and steadfast, right?
Now, I would like to say something regarding the part where he says, this chat is helping me understand that not only do we have to empty our cups of our attachments to the medicine, but also the energetic emotion. And for me, I mean, I think it's important to say, or at least to bring the idea of attachment, because our attachments are also energetic emotion. But the root of it, the attachments that we need to kind of, the only, for me, in my own personal experience and journey, what I came to realize that the only attachment that I should really work on releasing is attaching to ego, to self. And from there, it kind of radiates throughout the whole realm of attachments. And I mean, I love my mother, I love my friends, and there's attachment, and it's okay. As long as I'm not just bounded or conditioned by this grasping of attachment to myself, it kind of frees itself.
So, Marco, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you refer to as the ego is basically resistance to life. I have certain things the way I like and how I want things to be, and I don't want them to be different. And I want everything to be in accordance with my likes and wants.
Yeah, we can put it in that way. I mean, I also refer to it as the voice inside of my head.
Right.
Which is like always, I want, I don't want, and this kind of creating so much energetic, as it's put here, energetic emotion. It's for me like the only cup that needs to be emptied is the cup of our own, of our own self.
Right. Yeah, and I find that the attachment is like, yeah, of course, I find that it's okay to enjoy life as long as I don't seek the ultimate satisfaction from the things I enjoy. Right. So I can enjoy chocolate, but if I start looking for ultimate satisfaction, I'll eat so much chocolate that it will get me sick. Right. But I can appreciate it. I can eat a little bit and enjoy it. I can appreciate many things in my life and have those, like, as including friends and family and loved ones, as you refer to them, attachments. But then, of course, if I'm like starting to demand that someone will be there for me all the time, holding my hand and will be making me happy, then I'm starting to create misery for myself and others.
Yeah, it's very relevant. Like we have, like there's attachment to food, to our cell phones, our work, our comfort, all these things which are kind of it's like a double-edged sword in a way. But I guess for me, like what really was very like a strong lesson in my life is just if I just relax and let go of the attachment I have to my own self, it kind of creates just this kind of really it relaxes everything in a way.
Right. Yeah, I find that to be very essential is not to make it too contrived and too formal and rigid. So, but I know that for some people also that can be helpful. But in my own life, I find that it's the more natural approach, and to get to know, to see how I'm creating my own suffering, how I'm grasping or pushing something away, but not to judge it, but then to understand what is underneath it. Where is that coming from? Ignorance, from the word ignoring. And the same with renunciation that you mentioned before. There's also more esoteric insights into it, where at a certain point I see that I cannot find satisfaction from things that I've been looking satisfaction in all my life. I've been looking for timeless happiness in all the wrong places, and attaching the meaning of happiness to pleasure. And then suddenly I realized that it's not possible. And then renunciation comes from this kind of sadness. I have to say goodbye to my old self that has been grasping and seeking in all of those things. And then, the renunciation is not forced. It comes natural. I just know that I will not find timeless happiness. And, I'm just digging my own hole, and it doesn't make sense. And yeah, it makes me sad that I cannot keep doing it. But then I find much greater happiness somewhere else. So then renunciation is not like this kind of self-flagellation, punishing thing, right? It just comes from realization, from clear seeing. Yeah, there is timeless happiness, and it's not where I've been looking for all my life, right? So I have to, get rid of that habit.
Yeah, and we can also summarize this. I mean, I like this quote from the Zen, which is chop wood, carry water, and I don't know, like prepare food, right. Reach enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, and eat food. It's kind of like it's kind of the hero's journey. Or there's also a story in the Bible about the child who goes away and who gets into the pig's mud, and then he comes back to the father, and
the prodigal child.
Yeah, the prodigal child. It's kind of the return to this kind of our timeless happiness, but in a way where we engage with it in a whole different level. And
absolutely, yeah. Okay, great. So someone asked, Justin asked, the quote from Carl Jung about dying. So only that which destroys itself is truly alive. I believe that was the quote. It really stuck with me. I had to sit with it for a bit. Okay, great. That's wonderful. So I think we covered. So now we have Joseph. He's been very patiently waiting.
Yeah.
Hey, Joseph.
Hey, Roman.
Great to see you.
We can hear you.
Great. Yeah, great to see you too. Really beautiful conversation. Delicious food for thought. So I just wanted to share a bit of my personal experience, because I've been listening to this conversation through the lens of like a deep contemplation on the nature of death and dying. And I think I just wanted to maybe introduce that into the conversation around healing and awakening. Is facing our own mortality. And my personal experience is I just lost a very meaningful person in my life, actually, to cancer. Yesterday, he chose to end his life. Very, spiritually awakened person, acupuncturist, Chinese medicine practitioner, very influential person in my life. And he went through this very public process of dying. He had a terminal diagnosis 8 months ago, and his will to live was found in his death, because he was given the option of chemotherapy. He said there's like a 5 to 10% chance he would live. So he decided to just live out his days with this ever expanding tumor. And eventually he just reached the point where he couldn't bear the pain anymore, and he had medical assistance in dying yesterday. and I was just reflecting on that quote that you said, only that which destroys itself is truly alive.
Mm.
And so it's that recognition that this form is impermanent, that this body will not be a channel of life for infinity. That, and I was thinking there's that, that for me, the process of awakening to my true nature has been to face my fear of death and to come to a place of acceptance. And in seeing my friend go through this process, like seeing the grace with which he accepted his own terminal diagnosis, his own end of life, and that this recognition that, when you go into an old growth forest, you see these towering 1,000-year-old trees, but you also see a little, diseased little saplings. Not every tree in the forest lives to be 1,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Or a jaguar has a litter of pups. One lives, 5 die. And so, yeah, I just wanted to bring that into the conversation, because that's the way I've been perceiving this conversation around healing and awakening, and finding that will to live is what you said very early on is so important, but also finding that acceptance in death.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for bringing that, Joseph. And definitely the will to live can only come from facing one's own death and mortality, at least in my experience. And I've mentioned right in Amazon the death and rebirth, and there's this phoenix rising from the ashes. And so absolutely, in these traditions, death is such an essential part of the healing process, where it's essential. Without coming to terms with one's own death and mortality, it's not possible to really be at peace. And then from that peaceful heart open state, the healing is possible. But if I'm doing it from the survival mentality and just full of anxiety and fear, and then I'm not really trying to heal. I'm running away from my, understanding of death. So of course, coming to terms and coming to peace with death then allows the healing to happen from a heart-centered state. So thank you for bringing that up, Joseph.
And I would like to share something. First of all, I'm very sorry for your loss, and I wish him a peaceful journey on. And for me, what really helps, or the perspective which really sheds light in this kind of on the concept of death, stems from the Tibetan traditions, and in Buddhism, or in many different kinds of, even in Bonpo traditions, we are basically preparing for death throughout our whole life. And the point of practice is to practice also for the moment of death. And they also have this idea that it's not of reincarnation, of the soul not being not just born and die and that's it. It's kind of a mind stream which has been going on from different experiences. And also, in parallel with Tibetan medicine, there are different kinds of diseases, and some are connected with external influences, some are karmic, some are also provocations from non-visible entities. But yeah, also I have as I shared, a friend and a beautiful person that I know, which is a very profound, she's been a practitioner in the Dzogchen tradition teachings, and also she has been really cultivating presence, yet she had a cancer, which she holds also from her from her karmic background into this incarnation, which runs in the family, in the DNA. And we are all confronted with, we all have different conditionings in our life. Some children are born and they die after a year. Everybody comes with a different baggage. But I guess, it's for me what really relieves this idea of death is the understanding that death is not the opposite of life. It's not two different things. It's death is part of life. It's just different experience, and which opens up to a new adventure into other forms until we have this kind of what we call the total realization. So kind of stopping the cycle of death and rebirth, and to just abide in the absolute awareness.
Which is, you know, it's quite a concept to wrap the mind around, but it's good to start just from coming to peace, coming to terms, and definitely it can be helpful to see that there is a continuation after this physical plane of existence, and people, you know, tend to suffer a lot more. So whether people believe in reincarnation or not, but there is more and more evidence coming through also in neuropsychology that consciousness is a stream, and the brain is a radio. It's not the radio station. And so the consciousness is not bound only to the body. And then, of course, you know, different experiences with breath work or meditation or sacred plant ceremonies can help one have that experience that one is not, I'm not my body. I have my body, but I'm not my body. And who I am is something that is indescribable, imponderable, and uncontainable, right? What is it looking through our eyes and listening through our ears? Try to find it. Try to define it. You know, you will not be able to, no matter how much you try. So then starting to see that there is more to who we are than just this physical machine or a biosuit, so to speak. And then from that place, then starting to recognize the qualities that transcend just my ego, my individual limited self. And so that in itself can already be very healing. Where I end and others begin is a very fine line. And so then to recognize how we do share the same challenges, struggles. We all are born, age, get sick, and die eventually. And so, yeah, this is something that we can relate through, and we have the same range of feelings and emotions and experiences. Even the sense of separation that we all experience can become suddenly a connecting link. So Marco, if you want to share a little bit more, but I think our time...
No, I just wanted to ask Joseph the name of that person.
His name is Aaron Banfield.
Okay. Yeah, otherwise I'm good for the talk. It's been very interesting and profound.
Yeah, no, I love our conversations. I'm really grateful for you joining us today, Marco, and we'll share also maybe like some information about you're preparing for a symposium.
Well, two actually.
Huh?
One in June in Amsterdam and one in October in Tuscany in Italy.
And it's going to be in relation to the subject that we've had today.
Yes, it is. I mean, the one is about very focused on psychedelic therapies from the perspective of transpersonal psychology, and the one in Italy is about it's about coming out of the cave and the bridge between. It's actually this topic is basically healing and waking up, the bridge between these two.
Beautiful. So yeah, so maybe you'll share the links, and we'll share it with people who joined today, so people can follow. And I'm also interested, so we'll keep deepening the topic, and we'll continue having this conversation. I think we've established a good foundation, and we can continue going forward with this conversation reflection. It seems like people our friends who are listening got engaged and are interested, and so I love to share and make our spark brighter.
Kirsten has his hand up.
What is that?
Kirsten has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Okay, one more. Kirsten, great to see you with us today.
Hello there. I just wanted a quick share. This has been a really moving and really potent group to listen to and to connect to. I'm currently healing from multiple myeloma cancer right now. Went through a really deep transmutation in the hospital and died twice. Went through full visions, had a glimpse of Padmasambhava, and was told basically that this was not my time, and that this was a chance to return, so to speak, and to take a new approach at my life. Ultimately, the idea of transfiguration for myself. I love gene keys, and my life's work is 47 for anyone who connects to that. And it is the story of transfiguration. And so the multiple myeloma is actually an activation of my own genes. So this was, in my way and in my view, my opportunity that's being given to me to reach for something new. And I really connected to the transmission of that these things come online for reminding us to reassess our lives and to reconnect and to dig a little deeper. I would definitely was in a few years of kind of blindness and loss of myself and loss of direction and loss of my soul, and coming out of the hospital at 114 pounds. And I had a few days where I actually had a potent soul retrieval reading from the 7 sacred seals, for anyone who knows from that, and the prayer of divine will. And it was the most incredible experience I've ever witnessed. And I felt my soul come back into myself, and I realigned with my purpose and realigned with who I am and my past life memory, if you will. So I just wanted to share that just myself and, you know, my connection to listening to everything that's been shared today is incredibly beautiful, incredibly potent. And my path right now is still not done. I'm up to 147 pounds right now, and doing everything I can on my end, on my soul end, and my awareness, and cultivating that awareness and that opening and remaining open as well. And so this is a real blessing to connect here and listen today, because it really anchors and creates a deeper foundation for what I'm actually going through right now. Currently, I'm doing immunotherapy, which is monoclonal antibodies, and it's boosting my immune system to help fight off the cancer cells. But I feel like that's on the doctor's end, and on my end, I have my job to do, which is part of my deeper part of my soul, my medicine, and opening up to the world and the healing of the world as well, and forgiveness. So that's just my quick share, and sending love to all of you all. And love you, Roman.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kirsten. And also, I just want to express gratitude for you going through your journey, and not just doing it for your own sake, but also, you know, helping others to heal through you. And yeah, infinite blessings to you and all beings through you. And of course, you know, you bring up such an essential point, and you know, I'm grateful for this reminder continuously that none of us know how long we have. that, any one of us can go at any moment. And so then in that way, we can be truly alive in every moment. And it's really when I've been close to death, that's when I would actually be alive more than ever. And there was no time for silly dramas and things like that.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like this is the biggest blessing I've had in my entire life, to be honest. And I tell the doctors, and I've I've kind of created a little bit of a a rock star of myself in the in the hospital there. I'm being visited when I go in for treatments by different chaplain and people who are wanting to just ask me questions. And I just sit there and just speak with them, and it's just beautiful to connect with those people, with, like, well, now that we get to these points, like, how do we help others, and so it's just really beautiful. And the looks on others' faces, and myself as well, whenever I say that I don't regret this one bit, like not one little micro bit. I do not regret this experience whatsoever, because it has brought me so much closer to life than anything ever in my lifetime. And I've gone through so much oppression and suffering. And this is just this beautiful thing that that has just tied this whole thing together, and really just made life just way more vibrant, way more colorful. And yeah, and again, I don't regret any bit. Which is a beautiful thing to say.
This reminds me also, Kirsten, how what you just shared, that's that's considered to be really the most benefit that can be brought in our Tibetan lineage. There is the practice of Tonglen, right, which sometimes people relate to as the taking on suffering of others, but actually one of our teachers relates to it more as giving acceptance. So the only thing I can do is share the degree of acceptance that I have with my own challenges, with my own issues. And in that way, I'm automatically alleviating the suffering of others just by sharing that acceptance. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Tears of transcendence. And I too am on the Buddhist path for many years. So whenever I hear those things, especially, it's very beautiful to hear the cross culture of the indigenous South American, and which I'm very connected to as well from my childhood, all the way into this other stretching vast world of Tibetan lineage and Bonpo as well. So, well, much love, and thank you so much.
To share physical presence.
Yes, I will. Hopefully, I will be down there here soon. Yes, and sharing
Kirsten
some tea.
Is an amazing tea practitioner.
Tea practitioner, yes, and a Gene Keys adventurer as well. And I tell you what, taking on this challenge, life challenge, with a sense of adventure has changed everything for me as well too. It's like, this is an adventure. Going to a procedure is an adventure. Going to the woods is an adventure, and these are all healing modalities that I'm taking in as well. So yeah, it's all an adventure. And having that adventureness for me, like, brings a sense of excitement and joy, and kind of a childlike play through it all, which could be a lot scarier, without that initiation, if you will. But yeah.
Well, you're not lonely in that, brother. We all share the evolutionary healing of humanity. So yeah, thank you, and thank you, everyone. Marco,
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roman.
Many blessings. Take care of yourself and each other, and stay tuned. Love you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.